Welcome to Heidi Relationships. Today, we'll read some more stories from Reddit. But before we start, I would really appreciate if you could subscribe to the channel, like the video if you enjoyed it, and maybe leave a comment down below. That would help the channel a lot. Thank you very much in advance.
The first one is titled, 2-Decade-Long Dead Bedroom. This is how my dead bedroom of 19 years recovered. My wife and I dated for 4 years and then got engaged. We were engaged 1 year and then we married. We were virgins when we married. We had not had normal intercourse. We did, however, explore with mouth and hands prior to marriage. There were many times while dating and engaged that we approached crossing the line into PIV intercourse, but we never did. We would passionately make out with each other, and most of the time we couldn't keep our hands off each other. I never would have thought that our marriage would be a dead bedroom marriage. We married and immediately I knew something was wrong. My newlywed wife asked that we not have intercourse on our wedding night. We did have intercourse that night after talking for a while about it. She was very nervous and scared. She had begun birth control 2 months prior to getting married, and I believe the birth control affected her libido in a big way. The intercourse we had on our wedding night was painful for my wife. We went slow and used lube, but it was still uncomfortable to painful. She was able to finish with oral. I thought for a first time that it was okay. We were both very naive. We flew to a tropical island the next day and spent a week at a resort. We had intercourse once while at the resort. That experience went easier and less painful than the first. I tried to comfort my wife and assure her that it would get better. When we returned home, we went 2 months without having intercourse. I was rejected often. Many excuses given. She said nothing was wrong, but she didn't feel like having intercourse. I asked if she was worried about pain, and she said no, that it had felt better the second time and she believed it would be better the next time. We had several times of awkward sex during our first year together. 11 times total for our first year married. We talked often about sex and why we weren't having intercourse. Stress was mentioned as a reason many times. I began to do everything I could to reduce her stress while I was going through a doctorate program. Nothing I did helped. After 1 year of marriage, we talked about having children. We were ready to try. We got pregnant the first time we had intercourse unprotected. We had intercourse so infrequently that we know the date of insemination. Once we found out that she was pregnant, my wife said she was very worried about the baby if we had intercourse. She would get very upset if I suggested intercourse. She was avoiding my touch and wouldn't sit close to me on the couch. I eventually told her that I was okay to wait on intercourse until after the baby was born. We went from insemination to 3 months after birth without intercourse. My wife didn't offer to relieve any of my sexual frustration and wouldn't even if I asked. Other than sexually, my wife was loving and kind. We had children close together in those first years of marriage. In the first 5 years of marriage, we had sex less than 30 times. As we raised our children, I knew that women had difficulty with libido. I was a very active father. I changed every diaper while at home and did the majority of childcare while I wasn't at work. My wife often called me to get my advice on how to care for the children while I was at work because I normally cared for them. I had many talks with my wife about our low-frequency sex. After our children, she had no pain during sex and a vast majority of the time had an orgasm. Our frequency hovered around once every 1 or 2 months, usually coinciding with her ovulation. My wife believed at this point that she should only have sex if she is in the mood, and she refused to allow me to do anything that might get her in the mood. After about 10 years of marriage, our children are less demanding of our time. They can play with each other and don't have as many immediate needs. I had hoped this would give my wife and I time to reconnect. We weren't able to reconnect. My wife thought our infrequent sex was normal and perfect the way it was. She didn't understand how frustrating it had been to go from my mid-20s to my mid-30s with infrequent sex. She never considered my needs as true needs. When we did have sex, it had to be exactly as she instructed without deviation. She wouldn't try any different positions or mild kinks. She wouldn't share any fantasies or sex dreams. She wished I would just be quiet about our sex life. Around our 13th year married, I wanted an escape and I found it in an online game. I would immerse myself in the game in a way to escape from my painful reality. I played this game about a year and realized that it was monopolizing my time. I quit playing the game, but my reality still made me feel unloved and unwanted. I coached all of my children in every sport they wanted to play. I took our family on several vacations every year to exotic locations and cruises around the Caribbean islands. Sex was often off the table and wasn't a consideration for my wife because our children were closer to our bed than at home. Many times, my wife would say that we could have sex when we returned home only to reject me again at home. We spent a lot of time together as a family. I thought that my wife and I needed to get away from the kids to reconnect and enjoy each other. I planned trips to resorts with just my wife. I arranged for the kids' care while we were going to be gone. Most of our trips were sexless also, or after 5 days we would have sex once as quickly as possible. My wife would be offended if I suggested we have sex twice on one trip. She often said no matter how much sex we have it's never enough. I tried to tell her that once in a month is not a lot, but she was convinced that no one else had more sex unless they were a deviant. Around 18 years of marriage, our children can drive and are much more independent. My wife and I had more time at home alone. I had tried dates, romance, massages, music, poems, letters, baths, and anything else I read about to try to seduce my wife. Nothing seemed to help. When we did have sex, it was very satisfying for both of us. We talked about why we weren't having more sex and my wife just didn't get in the mood often and still didn't want me to do anything to get her in the mood. My wife had gone to the doctor to get checked a few times over the years. I asked her to ask her doctor about her low libido. They checked her hormones, and they were always normal. I had a vasectomy after our children were born, so my wife hadn't been on birth control for a long time. My wife told me that we would have more sex if I would have a vasectomy. That didn't help either. Funnily enough, her doctors each told my wife that she should relax and try to have more sex because sex helps you want more sex. She never took them up on their advice. I became more vocal about our lack of sex. When raising children, I often allowed our children to be an excuse for not having sex. But now they are self-sufficient and often not home. I could see that my future was going to be infrequent sex. The years of rejections had taken a toll on me. I had no confidence in bed. My self-esteem was at an all-time low. I felt alone and unwanted. My wife could tell that I was not handling the dead bedroom well. She suggested we try a marriage counselor. I had requested a marriage counselor years ago but was flatly denied by my wife at the time. I was terrified to go. I was afraid that the counselor would blame me or say that our infrequent sex is normal. I was pleasantly surprised when I felt the counselor was an advocate for me. We went about 10 sessions and learned how to communicate better. We had developed bad habits when communicating about sex. The counselor urged my wife to continue to work on having more sex. We had a brief time where we had sex more frequently, but soon the frequency went back down. I would point out our infrequent sex and my wife seemed surprised. Sex hardly ever crossed her mind. As time passed, I came to realize through reading at the Bedroom Sub that many people only find the sex life they are seeking by leaving their relationship. I had never considered a divorce over the lack of sex and intimacy. I began to think that after trying everything for almost 2 decades that I had to admit that the situation was unlikely to get better. I examined myself and found that I had a great career. I was well respected in our community. I was loved for my community service and giving attitude to our community. My children had been raised by both my wife and I in a loving home. I hoped they hadn't felt the impact of our dead bedroom. I didn't exhibit animosity or dislike for my wife. We were still loving toward each other outside of the bedroom. I was sad that the woman I had chosen to marry and have children with didn't desire me like I desired her. What would divorce look like for me? I would have to move into a smaller living space. We lived in a very large home with many acres of land with a large deck and pool. I had provided so much for my wife and family and felt I never got much from my wife in return. I hadn't tried to buy her love and affection. I was trying to give her the best life possible. Divorce would mean splitting our assets. We were well off and had paid most of our debts, so now would be a good time to split everything. I would not want my reputation damaged. I wouldn't want anyone to think that I had been unfaithful. I decided then that if we headed to divorce, I would be honest about the situation. I began to distance myself from my wife emotionally. She had been at the forefront of my mind during our entire marriage. I was always looking for ways to make her happy and fulfilled. I began to concentrate on me and my happiness. I began to daydream about a life with fulfilling sex with someone who cared about me like I did them. I realized that divorce was an option I had to choose. Several months passed and I had stopped all talking about sex. I had stopped trying to initiate any sex. I began to settle into a life without sex and accepting it until we were divorced. I saw no use in trying to continue to improve our sex lives when I had failed for almost 2 decades. My wife noticed my distance and she began to ask me what was wrong. I normally kept no secrets from her, but I wasn't ready to talk to her about divorce. She continued to feel me pull away and no longer engage with her. Our conversations no longer planned the future. I reduced our conversations to just our kids. My wife worried that she was losing me. My wife needed reassurance that our marriage was okay. She asked me one day as I sat at our kitchen table thinking about our future separated if I wanted a divorce. She had asked in the past to be reassured that I was still fully committed to her. This time she wasn't reassured. I asked her to sit down with me. I told her that I was thinking about divorce and had been for a couple of months. She said that she could tell that I was much more distant and less engaging. She said that our marriage counselor had encouraged her to give me an amicable divorce if she couldn't maintain a healthy sex life for us. She admitted that she hadn't and didn't know what to do. She told me that she understood and knew that she had let me down our entire marriage. She said she had tried but nothing worked. I told her that we were good financially and that I wouldn't do anything to hurt her financially in the divorce. We would both be in a good place financially. I told her that I hoped we could still share the holidays with our kids as they married and had grandchildren. She was glad that I was considering still being friends. We shared that we still loved each other. I told her that the hardest thing for me had been considering a life without her. I told her how bad I felt about not spending our older years together. We had so many dreams that we planned to fulfill as we got older that would no longer be possible. I talked about how we had been such a great couple together that other couples envied our relationship. I regretted that we never could get our sexual relationship to be in a good place for both of us. On the brighter side, told her that she would have no trouble finding another man. She is beautiful and very intelligent. I warned her that most men would expect to have sex, so she needed to work on that before getting her heart broken. I told her that I thought I would be okay and could find someone that desired me and wanted to have sex with me. I told her that many women had hit on me over the years, and I had always cut them off. I said maybe I will need to let them know about our divorce. She said she didn't know other women hit on me. I told her that I had kept that from her because I didn't want her to worry. I had always had eyes just for her. We ended up just sitting in silence holding hands for a long time. I began to get emotional thinking that we had finally made that big step toward divorce. Before we got up from the table, she asked if I would wait until after the upcoming holidays to see a lawyer and get an apartment. She wanted one more Christmas with the kids to not be affected by our divorce. Several weeks pass and we are attending parties and hosting some. We seem to be more relaxed around each other. No intimacy is happening. We had no more discussions about separating or divorce. I had expected her to put up more resistance, but when she accepted that divorce was the correct path, I knew divorce was inevitable. We had a very melancholy celebration of our 19th anniversary during the holidays. I used our anniversary to reminisce about our marriage and the good times and good things that came from our marriage. I reminded her that our children are wonderful, and I couldn't have had a better partner in raising them. I pointed out that we had a very healthy marriage other than our bedroom. We never fought and we hardly ever disagreed on anything. We supported and encouraged each other. I thanked her for helping me when I had a parent die unexpectedly years ago. I lamented that I would no longer be a part of her family. Her parents always showed me love and acceptance. I considered them my parents. I lamented with her having to give up on our dream of traveling together and exploring new places. I told her that with our finances being good that we were just on the cusp of being able to do several things that we had always wanted to do now that our children were grown. Our anniversary was a kind of cathartic night of memories being shared and putting dreams away. We had a dead bedroom for 19 years. I never got birthday sex or Valentine's sex, but we seemed to always have sex on our anniversary for some reason. We didn't have sex on our anniversary that night. 2 nights after our anniversary my wife initiated sex. She was sort of awkward in trying to kiss me, but I had never denied her and this night we had sex. I was very confused. I had thought that we would never have sex again and here we were having sex when in only a couple of weeks I planned to be moved out. She initiated sex the next night. Now at that point I was utterly flabbergasted. We hadn't ever had sex 2 nights in a row. I tried to talk to her about why this was happening, but she shushed my lips and whispered just enjoy this time together. I didn't interpret this as my wife trying to save our marriage. I thought she was trying to show me what I was giving up by separating but I thought we have never had sex 2 nights in a row. I was just confused. My wife initiated the next night and the next. My wife initiated every night through Christmas and through the New Year. It was now in early January, and we have had sex every night for several weeks. I asked my wife about my plans to move out and she looked at me sadly and asked if I still wanted to move out. I told her not that I was enjoying having sex with her every night, but I wanted to know why now? Why initiate sex every night now that I'm planning on separating? She told me to just enjoy the sex for now and we will see what happens. This nightly sex continued for several months without explanation until she finally explained what happened. She was desperate to save our marriage but knew that any half-hearted effort wouldn't work. She had started reading about dead bedrooms and possible solutions. She found a story of a woman doing a 30-day challenge where she had sex every day for 30 days. My wife thought that she might try this. She didn't want me to know what she was doing because she expected to fail like she had every other time she had made promises to do better but hadn't. She told me that after a couple of weeks having sex every night had changed something inside her. She began to look forward to seeing. She began to desire my body. This explained how she had opened up sexually. She was open to different positions. She had begun to include oral for me. Oral for me only happened once in our marriage and once while dating. Her seeking sex was unheard of in our marriage. Now it seemed everything was on the table to try and experiment. Over time I could see that she was very proud of herself for being able to overcome whatever had held her back all those years. I constantly praised her sexual efforts which made her feel good about herself. Sex had always been her area of failure. Talking about sex made her feel bad. Seeing a sexual scene in a movie made her feel bad about herself. Now sex was a positive. I made sure to constantly praise her efforts and tell her how much better sex had gotten over time. It seems that sex is like many things. Sex gets better with practice. I had tried to be a good lover but was limited in what I could do and how often. With more sex I became a better lover as well. My wife recognized that we were both becoming better in bed with each other. She had some health issues that were very scary for both of us that first year of recovery from the dead bedroom. She had to have 2 outpatient surgeries. I fully expected for the nightly sex to be postponed until she had recovered from surgery. The morning I was to take her to the hospital for surgery she woke me up an hour earlier than I had planned in order to have sex with me before her surgery. She said that she didn't think she would be able to have sex that night after her surgery but wanted to have sex that day instead. The day after her surgery she initiated sex and I was reluctant, but she assured me that she would feel better if we had sex. I saw then that she was committed to have sex as often as we could not matter the circumstances. We have sex when we are sick. We always feel better after sex no matter how sick we are. We have sex when we are tired. We always sleep better after sex. No matter what life has thrown our way we continue to have sex daily. This is so different than when we were in a dead bedroom. Any excuse at all was used to avoid sex. Now my wife is just as stubborn to keep the sex going as she was when she denied me sex or rejected me. Now over 4 years have passed, and we continue to have frequent daily sex. Often we will have sex more than once a day on weekends or days off from work. I'm thankful every day that my wife decided to put effort into saving our marriage. I could never have imagined how she would turn our dead bedroom around. I still wish it hadn't taken an impending separation and divorce to spur her into action. I still fear that the sex with my wife will stop as abruptly as it started. Thank you for reading my story. I hope to one day see many more stories on this sub of successes. This is the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed the relationship stories. Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video and write a comment. I really appreciate your support and it helps my channel so much. Thank you.